Hi, I'm Michael Pollock. I'm the director of Daraja, a nonprofit serving third culture kids and cross-cultural kids, particularly in the areas of transition and leadership development. I wanted to thank Grace and Salonia for inviting me to share some thoughts with you for the Change School, and particularly answering the question, how do TCKs realize their potential and maximize their contributions to social good? So, that shouldn't take very long. I can do that in a couple of minutes. I'll do my best. And I'm a TCK. I grew up in the era before the term was widely known. This book, Third Culture Kids, Growing Up Among Worlds, was a breakthrough after Dr. Ruth Usine coined the term. My father, David Pollock, and Ruth Van Reken wrote this book. And then I was also influenced by some other folks I consider giants in the field, one of those being Norman McKay, who coined the term global nomads. I raised my own kids. I was married, and my wife was actually also a TCK, born in Sierra Leone, but mostly grew up in the US. So she feels like she also fits in between categories, and you may be one of those as well, wondering even if you fit in the TCK world. You do. There's lots of room for all of us. In my experience of growing up and hearing the terms and coming to grips with them myself, I feel like it's the stories that are most powerful. What happens when a person spends time in a culture outside their own, comes back to their home culture, and finds that it's not their home culture anymore, and we're not sure what to do with that. What happens to their potential? How come so many of us get lost along the way and feel sidelined and confused and wandering? So we've done a lot of thinking about that. In my time in China with my family, I worked as a principal of a school and then directing an organization that I helped to start, mainly for helping to understand who we are as expats, and what we can bring positively to our families, our communities, and the society around us. So there's some things that I've learned in that process. There's much more that I'm still in the process of learning. But one is this dual side of both recognizing and addressing our common or specific challenges because they exist, and then the other side of identifying and building on our common and unique assets. We are poised for our time. This is a time when the world is blending and coming together, and not only in positive ways, as recent news we're very aware of. And so the need for people who are looking to invest their knowledge and their bridging skills, invest them across culture, and being agents of peace and positive change and humanity is really essential. So both those sides, recognizing the needs and the challenges, and the other side, and building on those common and unique assets. We'll talk a little bit more about that as we go. The second then is the second stage of that then is, once we recognize and identify, is to take stock of who we are and what we've been given. And I think there's some specific things we can do there. And then the final thing is, how does one take what one has and then develop it in going forward? And so those are some quick stepping off points for getting where we're going in a short time. So first of all, is thinking about the power of story. When I returned from Kenya to the U.S., was the northeast of the U.S. I had grandparents who said, well, welcome home. So glad you're home. And I thought, even after 3 years, not a really long period of time, but important to me developmentally, between 9 and 12, where I felt like I wasn't really home and I wasn't really glad. And so one of the first things that we hit is identity questions. Who am I really? Because if someone said, "Are you a Kenyan?" Obviously, I didn't feel like I was a Kenyan, but I didn't really feel like I was an American either. And so then the second was the belonging. To whom do I belong? I had a very close-knit community overseas, and many of you may relate. But then coming back to the U.S., when people said, "Oh, you're home and you belong here," I didn't feel like that. I felt like an outsider, like I didn't understand things, and I didn't have the same values. So identity and belonging, of course, and then the issues of grief resolution. Grief is a normal process that comes as a result of loss. When you're a TCK, your losses are multiple, and they're intense, and they're often unfinished. There's unfinished business because there isn't time to grieve the loss of a whole community. When a person dies, we go through an elaborate, hopefully, a strong process to say goodbye to that person and have closure. When you leave a community that's been a part of your life and has been important to you, oftentimes there's a quick plane ride and you're on the other side, and all those people in a sense have died to you, but there's no funeral, there's no way to express it, there's no way to process it. Now that we have the internet and a lot of ways to connect with people, that it's not quite the same as when we were leaving. When I was a kid, and we were still using those blue air forms, but it's still the same. There's still a loss. There's a loss of who you were and your belonging in the community, the loss of your story, as folks like Doug Oda explained so well. There's a loss of connection. There's a loss of your own history. There's a loss of your known abilities, and the loss of friendships, and then other things, potentially pets and houses that you lived in, and those memories. And so those things get lost. It's difficult to go back often and retrieve those. So we have those to work through. And then there come questions of purpose, general and specific. Why do I exist? Why do I exist in that background? Why do I carry these things with me? How might they help me? How might they hurt me? When people find out, where I'm from, or ask me where I'm from, and I have a difficult time explaining that, does that hinder me? Should I leave those aspects of me behind, or should I somehow draw them into my present and help them become a part of my future? What am I to do? So those are some of the common and specific challenges that we face. The identifying and building on common and unique assets, being poised for our times, are all those things that sometimes we can take for granted. Language and cross-cultural skills, cross-cultural intelligence, empathy and reserving judgment, adaptability skills, observation and critical analysis, transition skills. Some have more and some have less. But we bring all those with us as strengths, all those added pieces, to be able to see the world in 3D because we've been there and experienced it. Those are all amazing gifts. To be able to experience the life of the other, to be able to step into their shoes and to empathize. And again, these are broad strokes. Not every TCK is super good with empathy. Not saying that, but these are some of the skills that we tend to bring from our experiences. So what's the next step? If we can identify that we've got this basket of challenges and this basket of unique assets, I think the next step is to take stock. Sometimes we just don't stop to process and look at what we've got. We've got abilities and gifts. They're the natural aspects of a person. We have our formative experiences, positive and negative. Sometimes we have to break free of some of those negative experiences and work through them so that we can break through to growth and being able to give to others. We have proficiencies and skills. These are developed attributes, not one that you're just born with, but ones that you develop along the way. And we, as third culture kids, sometimes we get to develop ones that we're not sure how we're ever going to use them. Again, crossing the river on a zip line in the Tibetan hills. Well, it just might not come up again, but you never know. So you hold on to those. Those are important. Then there's personality that each person brings to the tables. Doing testing, finding out your Myers-Briggs personality inventory or the DISC are some important to know how do I fit? What are some of my common traits with others and my unique traits and the ways that they're put together. Taking stock of what you're passionate about, to know what it is that we love. And let me suggest that sometimes with TCKs, we shy away from some of the things that we love because when we love it, we often find that we have to leave it. Things that we've left behind. And those can be hobbies that couldn't be pursued in another country, even parts that we feel of our personality that didn't fit or don't fit where we are. But what do you love, and what really engages your mind and your heart? And then there are, I think, the things that are burdens. What weighs on your heart and mind? What do you see? Just I hate to see that happening in the world. I wish that I could change that. If I could change something about the world as it is, what would I do? And so those are important to identify because those are unique to us, even though they may be in common with others. But it's the unique mosaic of how those fit with us that matters. And then I think there can be a specific sense of of calling. I think it develops really uniquely. Sometimes it's a general calling to an area, and sometimes it's very specific. I felt like as I was going through high school, I developed a sense of calling to education. I wanted to teach. I wanted to impact the lives of young people. And so I developed that calling. Was it to a very specific place? No, but I did hope it would eventually take me overseas. After 12 years of working in the US, it did. And I wound up in China. And even that was a bit of a surprise. It was living and working in China where my second sense of calling really developed. For 9 years, I worked with young cross-culturals, third culture kids literally from all over the world. And in that time, it was the realization of the truth of what Ted Ward had said years ago. Dr. Ted Ward, he said that third culture kids are the prototype citizens of the future. And by that, he wasn't bragging and saying that the world ought to become like third culture kids. He was saying, no, actually they are becoming third culture kids. This is the way that our global population is moving. This is going to be the norm. And so as that kind of second sense of calling developed, it was struck with how important it is to see strong cross-cultural leadership developed. So in the sense, calling doesn't necessarily come like a lightning bolt out of the blue, and it doesn't come in a full revelation when it does come. I think it's a one step at a time, and it also has the potential for uniqueness with each person. I think there are some people who have, from very young age, a strong sense of where they're headed, and they go like an arrow and they hit that target. And others of us have to meander a bit, and then there's all kinds of new discussion about people whose life pattern really is moving from one thing to another because of multiple interests and multiple strengths. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. How does one develop those specific areas, abilities and gifts, formative experiences, proficiencies and skills, personality, passions, burdens, and a sense of calling? How does one move toward a purposeful contribution in society? For me, it was very, very, I'll share the process. I think there have been four things that I encourage in the young adults that I work with. The first is deep and prayerful reflection. As Dr. Francis Schaeffer said, if man is not the measure of all things, then there's something beyond us. There's a reality beyond us that we need to listen to. And so it's only when we take that time to sit, to be in the quiet, and to seek what's beyond us that we can really hear the truth about ourselves and about our direction. The second is in finding mentors, and I suggest three. Well, the first is a peer in the culture. We need people around us. We need community. We're made for community. And so a peer in the culture is an introducer, I would say. That introducer can connect you to the culture, help you avoid the pitfalls, help you to see the beauty of it and to adjust. That person, I believe, needs to be a very careful choice, because sometimes when we enter into a new community or a new culture, those peers who find us and want to be a mentor have space in their lives because they're not in a very healthy place in their own culture. And so discerning a healthy mentor is certainly important. Then I think it's important to have a peer who is cross-cultural, someone who understands your own experience. That's a listener and empathizer person, the person you can go to and say, I can't believe what happened today, or I just don't get these people, or can you believe it that, and that person can help walk us through that place of transition to a place where we can contribute and not just complain and deride the culture that we're in. And then there's the place of the older advisor. There's the navigation team person, someone who can see beyond the years and beyond the perspective that you have. It might be someone in your specific area of development or vocation and work, but it could be just someone who has experience in life. And so those three, the peer in the culture, the introducer, the listener empathizer, and the navigation team. Doesn't take your role as the navigator. You're still responsible for those choices, but it helps you with maybe with the maps and the compass. The third thing I would say would be it's important to take risks. Those risks have to be appropriate and they have to be calculated. I don't think that means that we should be calculating people, but I think that we need to weigh the risks that we take with what is our possible loss, what is our potential gain, and to make sure that if we're going to jump into something, we're not going to put ourselves at risk of severe loss or something that might cripple us for the future. But without risk and without that sense of challenge, there is no growth, and so that part is important. The final piece, and I think this wraps the others around, is what's sometimes lost in an individualistic culture, which is a sense of humility. Humility, I believe, is the right assessment of self. Right assessment of self doesn't put self down and deride one's gifts and abilities and experiences, but takes a healthy measure and doesn't put them too high above others. It's willing to be a learner and a servant. It also rejects the idea that I should already know. I think that's a TCK lie that we sometimes take in. I should already know this. And there are many things. What's the best is when you know that you're not going to know and therefore have to enter as a learner. And so kind of to recap quickly, I think it's important to recognize and address common and specific challenges. Then it's important to balance that out with identifying and building on common and unique assets. So we're poised for our time, balancing between the two, the challenges and the assets. And then it's important to take stock. And once we've taken stock, it's important to spend time in reflective prayer and time with mentors, and then willingness to take risks and wrapping that in humility. So those are some thoughts. I think when we walk through a process like that, we have more possibility to recognize and realize our potential as TCKs, to maximize our contributions for social good. I hope you find that as an encouragement. I welcome questions. You can find me on the web at www.daraja.us. We're also on Facebook, Daraja TCK, and you're welcome anytime.